My name is Hannah Parker. I'm 29 years old, and if you'd asked me a year ago what the hardest part of marriage would be, I would have said the money. My husband and I were still paying off student loans, juggling bills, and figuring out how to build a life together. But I was wrong. The hardest part turned out to be something I never imagined: fitting into his family. Or rather, surviving his mother. Patricia, my mother-in-law, has this way of looking at me like I'm some puzzle piece that doesn't quite belong in her perfect picture. She's not cruel in an obvious way. She's polite when she needs to be, even sweet when other people are watching. But behind closed doors, it's little things, sharp comments, a roll of the eyes, a condescending "bless your heart," that makes my skin crawl. Still, I always tried to win her over. I thought if I just worked harder, dressed a little nicer, or showed more effort, maybe she'd soften. I told myself, she's just protective of her son, give it time. But no matter what I did, she kept me at arm's length. The moment that still haunts me happened one Sunday evening. Patricia had invited the whole family for dinner, her way of keeping traditions alive, as she liked to say. Everyone was supposed to bring a dish. I saw it as my chance. Instead of picking something simple, I decided to make my grandmother's sweet potato casserole. It wasn't just food. It was a piece of my childhood. I grew up in a small town in Tennessee, and every holiday, my grandmother would make that casserole. Rich, creamy, with a buttery pecan topping that crackled when you bit into it. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. My grandmother passed away 3 years ago, and making that dish always made me feel like she was still with me. I spent nearly the entire afternoon in my tiny kitchen. I peeled the potatoes slowly, just the way Grandma taught me. Don't rush. Good food takes patience. I mashed them until they were smooth as silk, added the right balance of brown sugar, vanilla, and a touch of cinnamon. When the topping baked, the smell filled the whole apartment, warm and nutty, the kind of smell that makes you stop and close your eyes just to savor it. By the time I pulled it out of the oven, I felt proud. Nervous, but proud. I wrapped the dish carefully, tucked it into a carrier, and told myself that tonight might finally be the night Patricia saw me differently. When we arrived at her house, it was buzzing with chatter. The cousins were running around, her sisters were setting the table, and Patricia stood in the kitchen like the queen of her castle, directing everyone. My husband kissed her cheek and immediately got pulled into a conversation about football. That left me standing there, holding my casserole like a nervous schoolgirl waiting to be graded. I cleared my throat. "I brought Grandma's sweet potato casserole," I said, forcing a smile. "It's kind of a family recipe." Patricia turned, eyes flicking to the dish. For half a second, I thought I saw something soften. But then she smirked. "Oh, this looks interesting," she said, her voice light but dripping with condescension. Then louder for the others to hear, she added, "Well, let's hope it tastes better than it looks." The room broke into laughter. Some chuckled awkwardly. Others joined in fully. I wanted to shrink into the floor. I pressed my lips into a smile I didn't feel, but inside, my chest burned. As the evening went on, it only got worse. Patricia placed my casserole on the far end of the table, away from the centerpiece dishes. When the bowls and platters started being passed around, she deliberately skipped mine, handing it to the next person without even taking a spoonful. I watched as one by one, others followed suit, whispering behind their hands, some not even bothering to look at me. When my husband finally noticed, he tried to take a scoop, but Patricia quickly interrupted. "Oh, honey, you don't need to force yourself," she said, patting his hand. "We have plenty of food." That was the moment I felt something inside me break. I looked down at my plate, barely touched my food, and forced myself to nod and smile through the rest of dinner. My hands trembled under the table, my nails digging into my palm just to keep myself from crying in front of them. I wanted to scream. It's not about the casserole. It's about respect. It's about the fact that I've been trying for years, and nothing I do is ever enough. But instead, I swallowed every word. Later that night, when we got home, I carried the half-eaten casserole dish into our kitchen. The topping had gone soggy, the potatoes cold. I slid it into the trash with a lump in my throat. My husband tried to comfort me, saying, "You know how Mom is, don't take it personally." But how could I not? It wasn't just a joke. It wasn't just dinner. It was a deliberate reminder that in Patricia's eyes, I didn't belong. And what hurt the most wasn't the laughter, or the whispers, or even the empty plate. It was knowing that the dish that carried my grandmother's memory, the piece of myself I'd shared so openly, had been mocked and dismissed like it was nothing. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, tears slipping silently into my pillow. I told myself to let it go, to rise above it. But deep down, something had shifted. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about fitting in anymore. It was about standing up for myself. I didn't know how or when, but I knew one day Patricia would see me differently, not because I begged for her approval, but because I would take it back myself. That night marked the beginning of something I didn't yet have words for. A quiet storm building inside me. After that night at Patricia's dinner table, I thought the humiliation would just fade into another memory I'd learned to bury. That's what I'd always done, swallow the sting, tell myself it's not worth the fight, and carry on. But something about this one stuck with me. Maybe it was because it was my grandmother's recipe. Maybe it was because of the way everyone laughed, like my place at that table would always be as the outsider, the joke. I didn't tell anyone how badly it cut me, not even my husband. When he asked why I was so quiet the next few days, I just shook my head and said, "I'm fine." But the truth was, I replayed every detail in my head, over and over. The smirk on Patricia's face, the whispered laughter, the way my casserole sat untouched, like it was poison. It should have ended there. But 2 weeks later, the phone rang and my whole world shifted. It was Melissa, my husband's younger sister. I liked Melissa. She was softer than Patricia, less polished, less concerned with appearances. We weren't close, but we got along. Still, she rarely called me directly. "Hey, Hannah," she said when I picked up. Her voice was low, cautious, like she was testing the waters. "Hi, Melissa," I said, surprised. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. I could hear her inhale, like she was debating whether to say what she dialed my number for. Then, finally, I probably shouldn't be telling you this," she said, "but I feel like you should know." My stomach tightened. "Know what?" "It's about that casserole you made at Mom's dinner." My throat went dry. I leaned against the kitchen counter, gripping the phone tighter. "What about it?" Melissa hesitated again, and for a second I thought she'd hang up. But then she sighed and let the truth spill out. "The next day, Mom brought your casserole to her church potluck. She told everyone she made it. And Hannah," Melissa's voice cracked slightly, "they loved it. Like, people wouldn't stop talking about it. She even won their little best dish contest." I froze. The words rattled in my head, but they didn't make sense. "Wait, you mean she took my casserole? The one she mocked at dinner?" Melissa's silence was answer enough. "She won an award for it." I whispered. "Yeah," Melissa admitted softly. "People were begging her for the recipe. She was glowing, like it was her greatest triumph. But the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about you. About how humiliated you looked when no one touched it." The phone almost slipped from my hand. I set it on speaker, afraid my fingers would lose their grip. I pressed both palms against the countertop, trying to steady myself. On one hand, I wanted to laugh at the irony. Patricia had gone out of her way to tear me down, only to secretly claim my dish as her own. But the laughter never came. Instead, I felt heat rising at my chest, my pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. She didn't just mock me. She took something that belonged to me, something that carried my grandmother's memory, and paraded it around like it was hers. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. Melissa's answer was immediate. "Because you deserve to know. And honestly, because I'm tired of watching her get away with things like this. You're not the only one she does it to." Her words hit me like a weight. It wasn't just me. Patricia had been pulling this for years, cutting people down in private, then basking in stolen glory in public. When I hung up the phone, I stood there in silence for a long time. The kitchen felt too small, the air too heavy. My casserole dish was still on the shelf above the sink, clean and empty, but now it looked different to me. like proof of everything Patricia had taken and twisted. That night, when my husband came home, I wanted to tell him. I wanted to lay it all out. What his mother had done, how it made me feel, how I couldn't take much more of this. But when I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat. He loved his mother. He'd grown up with her as the center of his universe. How could I make him see her the way I did? Instead, I just asked, "How is work?" and let the moment pass. But inside me, something shifted. For years, I'd been playing defense, shrinking, smiling, taking the hits quietly. I thought keeping the peace was the safest thing. But this time, Patricia had crossed a line. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the truth. It was about my grandmother's legacy, my dignity, and the way I refused to let Patricia rewrite the story of who I was. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let her get away with it. I didn't know how or when, but I would find a way to show Patricia and the entire family the truth. No more silence. No more swallowing the hurt. Patricia had stolen my casserole, but she wasn't going to steal my voice. And so, quietly, without telling anyone, I began to plan. After Melissa's phone call, I carried a quiet storm inside me. Every time I replayed her words, "She brought your casserole to church and won a contest with it," a fire lit in my chest. I'd endured Patricia's smirks, her whispered put-downs, her constant need to make me feel like less. But this was different. This was theft. And Thanksgiving was coming. For Patricia, Thanksgiving wasn't just a holiday. It was her stage. Every year, she hosted with the same flair, fine china on the table, crystal glasses, a centerpiece designed weeks in advance. She was the queen of presentation, the keeper of family traditions. Everyone showed up to her house, ate her food, and praised her as though she were single-handedly responsible for the holiday itself. In her world, Thanksgiving was proof of her perfection. And in my world, it was the perfect chance to expose her. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want a dramatic confrontation in the middle of dinner where everyone would tell me to calm down. No. I wanted something quieter. Something undeniable. I wanted Patricia to be caught by her own game. So I came up with a plan. 2 nights before Thanksgiving, I went to the grocery store and bought everything I needed for my grandmother's casserole. But this time I doubled it. 2 full sets of ingredients. 2 dishes. 1 real. 1 fake. On Thanksgiving morning, I woke up early. The apartment was silent, just the hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sounds of my husband in the shower. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the pile of sweet potatoes on the counter, my heart thudding with both nerves and excitement. I peeled slowly, carefully, my hands steady, even though my mind was racing. I thought of my grandmother, her soft humming as she worked in her kitchen. "Good food takes patience, Hannah," she used to say. I whispered it to myself like a mantra. The first dish I made was the real one, creamy, flavorful, topped with the perfect blend of brown sugar and pecans. When I slid it into the oven, the smell filled the apartment, warm and rich, wrapping around me like a hug. The second dish, though, I made differently. Bland. Dry. No vanilla, no cinnamon, hardly any sugar. I overbaked the topping until it was pale and crumbly. It looked the part, but the taste would be unmistakably disappointing. When both casseroles cooled, I placed them in identical glass dishes. I even bought matching carriers so they looked the same. That afternoon, as we loaded up to head to Patricia's, I turned to my husband. "Hey, can you drop this one off at your mom's first? Tell her I made it early for her to put out whenever." I handed him the bland one. He didn't question it. Why would he? He thought it was just another casserole, not a carefully laid trap. By the time we arrived later, I carried in the real dish, smiling casually as though nothing were unusual. My stomach twisted with nerves, but I forced myself to stay calm. Patricia's house buzzed with activity as always. Relatives crammed into the kitchen, laughter spilling from the living room, kids running through the hallway. Patricia stood at the stove, pearls at her neck, lipstick perfect, directing the chaos like a conductor of her orchestra. When she saw me with my casserole, her eyes flickered, just for a second. A flash of panic. I almost smiled. She'd already accepted the bland one from my husband earlier. She thought she had me figured out. But now there were two. I placed mine on the table, right beside hers. Identical dishes side by side. For a moment, time slowed. My heart thudded in my chest as people began to gather. Plates were filled, food was passed, conversation grew louder. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Patricia's casserole was tasted first. Her sister scooped a spoonful, brought it to her lips, and frowned. This is different, she said carefully, forcing a smile. Her cousin tried next. He chewed, swallowed, then reached quickly for water. A little dry, isn't it? He said with a laugh. One by one, the comments came. Confused, polite, but undeniably critical. Patricia's smile tightened, her knuckles white as she clutched her fork. Then someone tried my casserole. This is amazing, Melissa exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. So creamy, so sweet. It's perfect. Others quickly followed, each reaction the same, smiles, nods, compliments flowing like water. This is the best I've had in years. Who made this one? I need the recipe for this. It's incredible. The room buzzed with praise, forks clinking as more people reached for seconds. And then all eyes turned to me. That's mine, I said, my voice calm but steady. I locked eyes with Patricia. My grandmother's recipe. I've been making it for years. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Patricia's face flushed deep red. She opened her mouth, then closed it, words failing her for the first time since I'd known her. Melissa cleared her throat, breaking the tension. Actually, Hannah, I think it's only fair to tell everyone. Mom brought your casserole to her church potluck a couple weeks ago. Claimed it as her own. That's why this is so awkward. Gasps rippled across the table. Cousins exchanged looks. Patricia's sisters whispered to each other. The truth spread like fire, impossible to contain. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The evidence sat right there on the table, her bland imitation and my authentic dish. Her lie and my truth. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking in my seat. For once, I wasn't the outsider. Patricia sat stiffly, eyes down, no longer the queen of her stage. And I sat taller, breathing easier, knowing this was only the beginning. The silence at the table that Thanksgiving night stretched on like an elastic band pulled too tight, ready to snap. Forks clinked nervously against plates. Conversations that had once been lively died mid-sentence. Everyone's eyes darted between me and Patricia. For years, Patricia had been untouchable. Her reputation as the perfect hostess, the matriarch of the family, went unquestioned. She controlled the narrative, carefully crafting her image for relatives, friends, even the church community. And now, all of it was teetering on the edge of collapse, unraveled by two casseroles sitting side by side. Patricia cleared her throat, finally lifting her gaze. Her smile was tight, forced. Well, recipes get shared all the time, don't they? It's really not such a big deal. Melissa let out a short, bitter laugh. It is a big deal, Mom. You embarrassed Hannah in front of everyone that night, made her feel like she didn't belong here. And then you took her food, claimed it was yours, and basked in the praise. The words hit Patricia like a slap. Her mouth opened, then closed again, searching for a defense. But none came. Around the table, the tide began to turn. One cousin murmured, I always wondered why her dishes seemed different depending on the event. Another aunt whispered, she did something similar with my pie recipe once. Voices overlapped, small confessions adding up, painting a picture that couldn't be ignored. Patricia's face paled. The room, the one she always commanded, was slipping from her control. I sat quietly through it all, hands folded in my lap, my heart pounding. I wasn't smug, though a part of me wanted to be. I wasn't triumphant, though I could have been. Instead, I felt relieved. For once, the truth was out in the open, and I didn't have to carry it alone. My husband reached under the table and squeezed my hand. He hadn't said much. He was caught between loyalty to his mother and love for me, but the way he held my hand told me everything. I see you. I hear you. I'm proud of you. After dinner, as people gathered their coats and pies for the road, the air was noticeably different. Patricia stayed in the kitchen, fussing with dishes that didn't need fussing, avoiding eye contact. Melissa hugged me tightly before she left. I'm glad you did this, she whispered. About time someone stood up to her. When the last guest left and the house fell quiet, Patricia finally turned to me. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. You didn't have to humiliate me like that. The word stung because I knew she truly believed she was the victim. I took a breath, steadying myself. I didn't humiliate you, Patricia. You did that yourself. I just stopped letting you do it to me. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she had no sharp comeback. That night, when my husband and I got home, I set the empty casserole dish on the counter. The pecan topping had been scraped clean, only a few smears of sweet potato left. I ran my hand over the cool glass, thinking of my grandmother. I whispered, "We did it, Grandma." But it wasn't just about the casserole anymore. It was about every time I'd stayed quiet, every time I'd let Patricia make me feel small. That night marked the first time I stood my ground, and it changed me. In the weeks that followed, Patricia was noticeably quieter around me. The jabs and smirks didn't disappear entirely, but they dulled. She never again mocked my cooking, never again dared to borrow one of my dishes. Something between us had shifted, not into warmth, not into love, but into respect born from confrontation. Melissa and I grew closer. Sometimes she'd call and vent about her mother. Sometimes we'd laugh about that Thanksgiving. Your face was priceless when people tasted her casserole, she'd say, and we'd dissolve into giggles like teenagers. My husband eventually admitted, I always knew Mom could be tough. But I didn't realize how much it hurt you until that night. That confession softened something in me. For the first time, I felt like we were truly a team, not just against his mother, but in life. As for Patricia, she never apologized outright. That wasn't in her nature. But one Sunday, months later, when we were sitting around the table again, she gestured toward me and said, Why don't you tell everyone about that casserole recipe of yours, Hannah? It really is something special. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't always look like grand gestures or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it's quieter. Sometimes it's standing your ground, refusing to be silenced, and letting someone's own actions reveal who they truly are. That Thanksgiving didn't just change the way Patricia saw me, it changed the way I saw myself. I walked into that house as the outsider with the casserole no one touched. I walked out as the woman who finally claimed her place at the table. And I never looked back.